What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Week 12 NFL Power Rankings show. To the 84% of you that are U.S. viewers, happy Thanksgiving week. To the 16 or so percent of you that are international viewers, shout out to you guys as well. We don't forget about you. But an interesting week here. We had some big upsets and some big news to break down since last week's Power Rankings in terms of the Deshaun Watson injury, the Joe Burrow injury. So should be a fun one. Please do hit that like button before we dive in. It really does help me out. I really appreciate it. Takes just a second. It's a free and easy way to support my channel. But without further ado, let's get into it. Starting at the bottom, the Carolina Panthers reclaiming the dead last spot in the power rankings this week. The offense just continues to be anemic in every single phase. I don't really get why Frank Reich offensive lines have been the absolute bottom of their potential in the last couple of years. I think Reich needs to look his teams in the mirror a little bit and figure out why the hell that is, because the Colts offensive line has been just fine since he left, and there's talent on the offensive line in Carolina, but they can't swat a fly in terms of pass protection there, on top of a bevy of other issues there. At least the defense is fighting, right? But let's move on. The New York Giants find themselves back in the top 32 this week after we ranked Georgia 32nd last week. But, you know, just an all-around credit to Tommy DeVito, to Brian Daboll, who I think coached his best game on the season in terms of using play action and getting guys open, carving up that Washington secondary. Saquon Barkley played great. And, of course, this Giants defense has been at least average all season. It's just that they've been asked to do too much because the offense has been so bad. Dexter Lawrence in a normal NFL season would be having an NFL Defensive Player of the Year type of season, but Myles Garrett exists, so it's probably not going to happen. But he is insane. So, yeah, the Giants back into kind of NFL competency, I suppose, although this is the bottom tier still, and they have to play our number 30 ranked New England Patriots, who are coming off the bye this week. We'll see what the quarterback debacle looks like after they benched Mac Jones in week 10. But yeah, the Patriots suck, and I expect that to continue. And then joining the bottom tier this week are going to be the Tennessee Titans. The offensive line, as I've said, is just a complete non-starter, and I know people want to rush to like bash rookie quarterbacks and all that stuff, but we can't even really evaluate Will Levis right now. You know, when he's given some form of a pocket and somewhere to go with the football, I think he's actually shown that, you know, he's going to be an interesting prospect for them and probably their starter next season. But beyond that, I think this defense has kind of lost that frisky underdog mentality where they know if they come out and play, they have a good chance of winning. The offense just is not at that level right now where even solid defensive performances can keep them in games. So I think the defense is starting to get a little bit softer. So I really think the Titans belong in this bottom tier right now until proven otherwise. But then we climb up into the NFL middle class, which again is going to have 14 teams in it, a massive cluster here in the middle to bottom middle of the league of just kind of frisky teams, you know, that are fighting for their season. But the Chicago Bears are going to stay at the bottom of this tier, but what a fight against the Detroit Lions. You know, I think they've shown with Justin Fields and his playmaking, it's going to bring some more offense to the table. Defensively, obviously, they folded in the second half against Detroit, which you don't love to see, but they have been fighting in the last month. So, you know, I want to give the Bears some credit. It is unfortunate for them that they blew that game, because if they came out and beat Detroit, they're kind of right in the mix of this horrible NFC, but falling to 3-8, it's obviously a dagger in terms of any playoff hopes for them, I think. Then we have the Arizona Cardinals at number 27. I just think they're a really tough out with Kyler Murray in there. And in Houston, they had the ball in their hands with a chance to win that game late. And I really think that's who this team is going to be. I think Kyler brings those explosive plays to the table, and this defense is actually pretty well coached and plays hard. They're kind of in the same boat as the Chicago Bears. I just think Kyler's a better quarterback than Justin Fields, and that's kind of the main difference right there. But then we have the New York Jets at number 26, and it's just, I really struggle to even talk about this team anymore. Mekhi Becton goes down this week. They're going to turn it over to Tim Boyle as if that's going to solve their offensive issues. I mean, this is one of the best defenses we've seen in the last 5 years, and it's just been completely wasted by offensive incompetency and injuries. It's just brutal. They're going to fall down now 5 this week. And I think that kind of hope of an Aaron Rodgers return is fading away too, because it's like, why would you rush him back behind this offensive line when you're now falling out of the playoff picture? Then we have the Las Vegas Raiders at number 25. I continue to really like what we're seeing from Antonio Pierce, and given the fact that they're fighting hard for him, and they've been a very frisky football team under Antonio Pierce, and no one's really going to want to take this head coaching job anyway next year because they're in something worse than purgatory right now. Why not kind of let this thing roll into next year with Antonio Pierce? But at the same time, it's like I get the Aiden O'Connell thing, because it's like, literally give us anybody other than Jimmy, because that was the last regime's decision and all that. But also, like, are we really playing this out to see if there's some upside in Aiden O'Connell? He's 25 years old as a rookie. He's playing exactly like he did at Purdue, where, he's going to sling it, but he's going to miss a lot of throws. He's going to make a lot of mistakes. I just don't see the upside in Aiden O'Connell. And it's just like, let's just get to next year. They're going to lose a lot of games with quarterback play like that. I'm not trying to bash O'Connell. He's doing a valiant job given the circumstances, but they're in a tough spot right now with that position group. Then we have the Washington Commanders at number 24. I think Washington had the worst week out of anybody. You lose to the New York Giants, who I literally didn't even rank as a top 32 team in the NFL last year as a joke, because their offense was so anemic, and they come out and give up, 29 points? Their secondary is just getting abused, and Tommy DeVito's lighting them up. Like, that's embarrassing from the defense. And then you have 6 turnovers, some on Sam Howell, some on others. What the hell are the Washington Commanders right now? If they beat the New York Giants, they're in a prime position to fight for an NFC wildcard spot. But this thing just, in my opinion, continues to spiral into literally just blow it all up, other than Sam Howell and maybe Eric Bieniemy, depending on what your other options are for offensive coach / coordinator. But yeah, they're a really frustrating team, and what a devastating loss this week for the Commanders. Before we get to our next team here, I want to tell you guys about the sponsor for today's video, Underdog Fantasy. We've got 4 daytime, primetime, whatever, Thanksgiving, Black Friday games coming up, and getting in on Underdog Pick'em lineups is going to be your best way to really enjoy the holiday stretch of football here. You can set your lineups selecting player stats, higher or lower, anything from passing yards to fantasy points, you name it. And if you hit on your entire slip, you can get up to 20 times your money. You can also purchase insurance, get that payout down to 10 to 1, but it allows you to miss on one of your picks. I'm definitely going to be playing Underdog lineups for all of these games this week, and I know you guys will enjoy them too. And most of all, if you sign up right now using promo code TFG over at Underdog Fantasy, not only will they match up to $100 on your first deposit, but you'll support my channel in a big way, and I really appreciate it. So that's promo code TFG over at Underdog Fantasy. But at number 23 in the rankings here, we've got the Atlanta Falcons, who were on bye. They're going to be able to look at this coming off the bye week, obviously, and look at the NFC standings with Seattle with a near impossible stretch coming up and Minnesota losing. Atlanta has an opportunity to get into the mix if Arthur Smith can get out of his own way. They've got to find out the right combination of touches with these awesome playmakers. They got to start playing a little bit tougher on defense. I really think they have it in them to get into the mix, but they've obviously had some really bad losses lately, and they got to turn this thing on quickly. I'm cautiously optimistic about them. They were my pick to win the NFC South, and I still think it's ahead of them here. But obviously ranking them as the 3rd best team in the NFC South, I'm not going to just rain on confidence on them either. And then we have the Tampa Bay Bucks staying in the NFC South. They lose to the Niners this week, and they continue to be that team that, like, okay, they're going to get 17 points every week. How frisky and how tough can that defense be? The Baker Mayfield experiment kind of feels the same every week, where you get some nice plays, you get some mistakes, you get some miscommunications, and again, you end up with about 17 points. It's pretty crazy how consistently mediocre this team is. And that didn't change this week. They just ran into a better team in the Niners. But then we are going to have the Cincinnati Bengals dropping down 12 spots after losing Joe Burrow. And that's a similar number to how much the Minnesota Vikings fell after they lost Kirk Cousins. I do this every time when a team loses their starting star quarterback. And, obviously the Vikings rallied as a team. They found a Josh Dobbs to come in and play really good football. And the Bengals are going to be turning to Jake Browning. And am I expecting him to win football games for this team? No, I'm not. I still love this defense. You have Jamar Chase. You have T. Higgins. They're not going to be an easy out necessarily, and they're going to fight till the end to try to, sneak into the playoffs and all that. But, I don't think this is a top half team in the league and not even really close to 16, obviously. So, big fall for the Bengals in just a brutal week. It just sucks. Just absolutely sucks, but I think it's fair. Then we got the Indianapolis Colts. They're going to take advantage of the Bengals and Jets falling while they're on bye week. They're 5-5, coming off a pair of pretty easy wins against bottom-tier teams, but, the O-line and overall coaching on this team, I think is pretty damn good. So they're going to gain a couple spots, and then the biggest risers this week are going to be the Green Bay Packers, who have really turned things around in the last couple of weeks. They really got into a rut there in October offensively. They just could not move the ball. They were having these horrible slow starts, but they've figured out a lot of stuff, honestly. I mean, Jordan Love has played so much better this last month of football, and it's pretty crazy that you still go on Twitter and people still just call him a bust. He started 6 games and everybody just wrote him off. Well, the last month of football, he's been, the 16th best quarterback in the league. Like, he's been pretty damn solid for the Packers. You've also got a lot of these young players not named Christian Watson stepping up. Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks looks awesome. Luke Musgrave has been better. Hell, even A.J. Dillon has been better in recent weeks. So they're much more competent offensively and defensively, despite Joe Barry. They're like league average, right? Their biggest issue right now is honestly their kicking unit, because it cost them the Steelers game last week, and it almost cost them this week against the LA Chargers, leaving 4 points on the board. But you get the game-winning drive from Jordan Love. He's taking care of the football. He's making bigger throws down the field. Things are just working for Green Bay, and hopefully they can give us a good, fun game against Detroit where they don't get killed like they did the last time, right? Because that was where that slow start offensively really started for them. We'll see if they can prove in this matchup that they have learned some things and gotten better in that first Thanksgiving game. So it should be fun. And obviously, the P word, the playoffs word, is not something you want to go throwing around. But if in some miracle they did beat Detroit, things could get interesting here. Then we got the New Orleans Saints coming off the bye week. They have the best baseline of NFC South teams. We'll see what happens with Derek Carr, but they do have a solid defense, solid offense. A little bit frustrating week to week, but this is what they wanted when they signed Derek Carr, right? Win the division at 9-8. They're on their path to doing that. Then the LA Rams. I went out on a limb at 3-6 and ranked them 18th last week. I don't know if anybody would have had them ranked too much higher. That's one of the parts I'm proud of this power rankings, is they are power rankings, not NFL standings. And I really felt like getting Matthew Stafford back, this team was going to be much more competent. And that's exactly what happened. He came out firing in the second half. They got an opportunity with Drew Lock coming in for a couple drives. And then Aaron Donald turned it on in the second half. And they come out and get a huge win against the Seattle Seahawks. They are now 2-0 against the Seahawks. And that Seahawks team has to turn around and play the 49ers twice, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. You've also got the Vikings, who just picked up a loss with Josh Dobbs. So that's why I keep alluding to these bottom NFC teams. This could close quickly, and I'm looking at teams like the Rams, the Packers, the Falcons, maybe the Bucks. Would not be surprised if one of these teams kind of rallies here and becomes a playoff team in this laughable NFC. But then the Minnesota Vikings are at 16, and they are in a really good position, of course, to make that playoff run. But this isn't all about who makes the playoffs. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter in terms of who the good football teams are. The Vikings defense continues to be super impressive. They put out a pretty solid effort against the Broncos, even though Courtland Sutton was just mossing them left and right. Only so much you can do about that. But if Dobbs continues to play like this, and that's a pretty big if, right? This is similar to what we kind of saw in Arizona, where the first 2.5 games, he played really well, and then things kind of fell off a little bit. The second half of that Broncos game wasn't necessarily pretty for Josh Dobbs, but I still think you see an interesting kind of low-end starter of a quarterback there that I'm rooting for. But that's really what this comes down to, right? If he plays like a backup, if he plays like he did in the last few days, last few games in Arizona, the Vikings are in trouble. If he plays like the guy he's been for the majority of his time here in Minnesota, I think this team is right about the middle of the NFL, ranked 16th for a reason. And they're going to be in a lot of games, again, because of that defense. So, 16 feels about perfect for the Vikes right now. And then we have the Denver Broncos, who are on an absolute hot streak. Broncos fans might even be asking to be jumped up a tier here. And I just don't think they're dynamic enough on either side of the ball. But I will say this team reminds me so much of Russell Wilson's old Wisconsin teams, where it's let's run the ball, let's take care of the football, and let's play as hard on defense as we possibly can, even though we don't necessarily have superstars. Although, was J.J. Watt on his Wisconsin team? I don't think so. But either way, this is a team like the Vikings that they're going to just kind of try to win every game 21-20. But they're not a team that, to me, feels like they're going to control any aspect of a football game. They're really going to slug through it, though they've had success doing so the last couple weeks against some good teams. So, credit the Broncos. They've really impressed me in a lot of ways. But am I looking at this as like a good football team, like a legitimate playoff caliber team? Not quite yet, though. The more wins they keep stringing together, the closer we're going to get to that. But then we get to my third tier here, and these to me are good teams, sort of playoff caliber teams any given week, but are teams that I do not view as any sort of potential Super Bowl teams, whether it's explosiveness or consistency. And this is going to start with the LA Chargers. And I will not quit this idea that the Chargers are a good football team. They still have one of the most explosive offenses in the National Football League. But how disappointing was it to wake up to not see that Shefty bomb that this team has let Brandon Staley go? He's snapping at reporters who are pissed off because his defense continues to just be horrible. And they did lose Joey Bosa this week, which certainly is not going to help there. But again, to justify this ranking, they can move the ball with the best of them. And again, in this game against the Packers, they moved the ball like crazy, but Chargers gonna Charger showed up as much as it ever has this season and this week, where you have drops galore. And even beyond that, this is just something that, like, the Brandon Staley, they're just not a smart culture and football team. So when you go to Lambeau, you got to wear the special cleats that every NFC North team knows, most of the NFC teams know. In general, you don't see teams go to Lambeau and slip all over the place, because it's known around the league that their field is a certain condition, and I think it's you want the certain metal spikes or whatever it is. I don't know exactly what the specific cleats are, but they kept talking about this on the broadcast, and you saw every other play. You have Chargers players slipping out of their breaks and, slipping into their routes. You have Austin Eckler slipping at the goal line and then fumbling. It's like, where are the damn right cleats, Chargers? Another example that this team just lacks that attention to detail and smartness, for lack of a better term. So Chargers showed up big time this week, even though Justin Herbert played one of, if not his best games of the year, and just got let down left and right. Chargers, man. But then we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are going to jump up 2 spots because we're going to bump them over the Chargers, and the Bengals, of course, losing Joe Burrow. But the offense continues to just be so horrible. It's crazy that they don't throw the ball into the middle of the field. Shout out to Benjamin Solak, who posted all of Kenny Pickett's throws past the sticks, and they're all just like comebackers on the outside. And it's like, Hello, this is the most efficient part of the field that everybody's trying to expose in the NFL, and you're not using it? What are we doing, Pittsburgh? Defense played hard. They were right in against the Browns. The Steelers are still the Steelers. Nothing about this game, despite the loss, changed my opinion of them. I just wish something would change offensively, other than Jaylen Warren is freaking awesome, man. He is clearly the best running back in Pittsburgh at this point. But then we have the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to stay with the number 12 spot, but I am going to drop them out of that second tier. I just do not trust them from a consistency standpoint on either side of the ball. And the best way I can describe the Seattle Seahawks, at least in my mind, is they're a good team, obviously, but to me, they're just an assembly of talent. They're not really a cohesive football team to me. You've got Geno and the offense, it's very drive to drive. They have so many wasted drives where it's just dropbacks where you're like, I don't really know what the plan was there, or it's mistakes from Geno Smith. Sometimes it's an offensive line issue too. You know, their run game feels they're kind of like the Bills in a way where it's like they run the ball because they feel like they're supposed to, but they never, to me, feel like they assert the run game or are this intimidating ground game. And then especially defensively, I really like the roster, but, you know, Clint, I think it might be defensive coaching, or it's just they haven't figured out how they're all going to play off each other yet. Because again, I think Maffei's having a big year. I like Leonard Williams as an addition. I think they have talent at all three levels, but they don't have any sort of fear factor as a defense at all. They feel a little bit squishy in their zone coverages. I don't look at them like, oh, that's a terrible defensive line to go against, right? I don't feel like they're stunting things up at some elite level. They don't, shut down the run. I just think they're a good team, but they're extremely beatable game in, game out. And I just can't honestly put them in a tier of potential Super Bowl teams when I just know in my heart of hearts that they're never going to get through a 3-game stretch of Detroit, Dallas, San Francisco, Philadelphia. And I really think this upcoming schedule that we've talked about, where they have to play the Niners twice, they have to play the Eagles and the Cowboys, is going to potentially be a tough reality check for the Seahawks. I love this team. I mean, you can see I got lots of merch. I got the helmet. I got the Metcalf J. I'm a Seahawks guy, but I'm not necessarily a Seahawks believer for this home stretch here. Would love to be wrong. Then we have the Houston Texans at number 11. They just continue climbing. CJ Stroud actually had a little bit more of an up and down game here, but I mean, the ups might have been as high as they've been for him, right? Like, he still ended up with I would say, a great game, despite making some really bad interceptions in this game that kind of invited the Cardinals back in. But he continues to just wow with the anticipation throws and the playmaking and the arm talent too. Like the throw he made to Tank Dell, where he just continues to, on the run, kind of like on the move, at least he reset his feet, but just lofting it deep over the secondary. He's just balling out right now. He's got the playmakers. I think he's got the offensive line. The run game has come along. Devin Singletary, man, I thought that was an underrated signing. He was horrible until 2 weeks ago, and now he's looking like that underrated running back that's been in Buffalo for a couple years. So everything's kind of clicking offensively, and I like this defense. They're incomplete, but you get Derek Stingley back. He had an interception this week. Like, this is a good, in a normal conference, playoff caliber team. We'll see if they can finish this up and get into the playoffs. They are actually in a pretty good spot to do that. It'd be a ton of fun to see Stroud get in and kind of have, in a lot of ways, I would say, a season like the Jags had last year, where they got in, they pulled off an upset against the Chargers, and then really came into next year like ready to roll. I mean, that'd be a really great script for the Texans. Do I see them as a Super Bowl team? I'm not there yet, and I think that's fair for kind of obvious reasons. But what an incredible story they've been. Then we have the Cleveland Browns at number 10, and they're not going to fall as much as the Bengals fell this week. by the way, because I could see some Bengals fans being mad about this, because A, they've been winning games with their backup quarterback already this season, and B, losing Deshaun Watson is not the same as losing Joe Burrow, especially when they have the best defense in the NFL and probably the best defense we've seen in 3 years, 5 years. This defense continues to just scare the living daylights out of me. Myles Garrett is going to walk away with the Defensive Player of the Year at this point, and they feed off of that energy. And I like that they've kind of figured out some stuff offensively with the screen game and some of the runs and some of the QB runs, where it's like, we know we're going to have some 3-and-outs. We know we're putting a lot of pressure on this defense, but as long as they can protect the football, they know they're a team that can legitimately win games 13-10, 17-14, 16-13. And I think that includes should they run up against any of these AFC teams. At least any given week. Can they go on a 4-game stretch of that? It would be near impossible. But this is a 7-3 football team that legitimately has not had good quarterback play at any good point, at any real point in this season. And I think dropping them out of this tier, despite the Watson injury, would be a little bit disrespectful at this point in time, especially after they just beat a good Steelers team. But I am going to have the Buffalo Bills ahead of them this week. They make the change at offensive coordinator, and it definitely felt like they had more of a plan. And I kind of had a feeling week 1 of the Joe Brady experience would feel like that, where if I was Joe Brady, I said I would dial up the entire, I talked about this on the Fully Inflated Football podcast. I was like, I would get a couple Red Bulls. I would spend all night just watching our offense from the year, taking notes. What is it that we do well? What is it that we don't do well? What is it that it feels like we're trying to force into the offense because it feels like we are supposed to do that? Rip out that stuff and just do the stuff that they do well. And the run game has been so good this year. It was great last week against the Jets. The underneath passing game, Josh Allen, just knowing the plan, running the offense, not having to do that much. It felt good. And I like Joe Brady. It was good to see them do that week 1. If they can be that, they are one of the 3 best offenses in the NFL. And that's obviously going to make them a potential Super Bowl team, even though the defense has all those injuries, and they are putting a lot on the offense's plate every single week. But a good bounce-back week in Buffalo, to say the least. Then we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Very glad I didn't lower them against the Niners. They had a big bounce-back game, really just throttling the Tennessee Titans. And there's not a ton to say about that. The Titans are obviously horrible right now, but their defense just continues to play underratedly well. I think all 3 levels just kind of dominated against the Titans again. But Trevor Lawrence coming out with one of his better games of the season. Some of the throws he was making this week, getting Ridley going, I think was a committed effort by the Jags, knowing they need that guy to be something like a number 1 wide receiver if they're going to go on a run in the AFC. And I think getting his confidence going here heading into December was a really smart plan against a defense that they could take advantage of with a lesser secondary there. So big week for the Jags. They get a +2 into the top 8. And with some of these injuries in the AFC, well, why not the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? And then I've got the Miami Dolphins at number 7, and I just thought, it's time to lower them. It's been, a month since it's felt like this was that all-time great offense that can just boat race anybody. They obviously have Tyreek Hill and Raheem Mostert, and Devon Achane gets hurt again this week, but they're hoping to have him and Jalen Waddle. Like, they obviously have explosive potential any given week. But I do think a little bit of it is the NFL has caught up to this kind of quick pre-snap motion stuff where the Dolphins want to go with the football a little bit more. It feels like Tua a little bit more is forcing the ball into triple coverage once or twice a week. I do not think Tua had a good game against the Raiders. Now, I'm not trying to slam the Dolphins. I still have them in the top 7 in this Super Bowl tier ahead of some really good teams here like the Jags and the Bills. But part of this is I think the 2 teams that are jumping them have played better, more dominant, more consistent football in the last month, and that needs to be reflected at this point. You know, that game against the Raiders was a game that the Dolphins should have come out, played a clean game, and had a statement heading into the second half, and they really didn't. Tua did not have a good game. I do continue to be a little bit worried that you could get to January, and any given week, you've got Tua trying to give the ball to the defense 3 times in a game. So I know it sounds negative, but I still like the Dolphins, but I do think this was a little bit of a disappointing week for them. And then we've got the Detroit Lions at number 6. I just love the resiliency of this football team in so many ways. You know, every team is going to have a half here or a half there where some unlucky things happen. You fumble a kick return. You got deflected interceptions, and Jared Goff played his worst half of football easily on the season. It was just they fell into a trap game against the Bears. It was looking like they were going to lose, and they were just going to have to bounce back in a short week on Thanksgiving against the Packers. But they bunkered down and got the job done and figured out the offense late. Jared Goff clicks on. Jameson Williams steps up, makes a big play. And this offense just has so many answers because you got a quarterback that can throw to all 3 levels. I mean, you have a vertical threat like Jameson Williams. You've got other, passing options, Gibbs, Laporta, St. Brown. The offensive line continues to be incredible. And you got Ben Johnson that knows all the answers to the test. So, that's the real impressive aspect of this Lions team. Defensively, I actually don't love what they've done the last month of football, and I'm actually a little bit worried about their pass rush outside of Aiden Hutchinson and some of these corners. But sometimes when the offense plays like this, it doesn't matter. And then we got the Baltimore Ravens at number 5. Once Joe Burrow went down, they ran away with that football game, but they were going punch for punch with the Bengals before the injury. Obviously, losing Mark Andrews hurts, but I think Lamar is playing so well this year, and you've kind of got this reemergence of Odell Beckham looking like the late season Rams Odell Beckham. He's got his juice back. He's got his energy back. He's developing more of a chemistry with Lamar. That's a little bit of a trade-off there that I think is working. And this defense is awesome, man. So they're really impressive. They're actually the number 1 seed in the AFC at the moment. And honestly, if they beat a full-strength Bengals team with Joe Burrow, I'd probably be more willing to put them up in the Super Bowl frontrunners tier, but it's just that win this week didn't do much for me. But they are going to jump up 1. I think they just continue to climb in general here. But then the Dallas Cowboys at number 4. Again, still just waiting on them to win a big game before we put them in the top tier. That's been the thing for them, right? They boat race these bad teams, but then can't quite get the job done against the best teams in the NFL, the very best teams in the NFL. But I do want to give Dak Prescott his credit. He's on the best 2-month stretch of football he's ever played. I think he's playing, to me, like a tier 2 quarterback, a great quarterback. Can he keep that rolling now into December? Because that could be a game changer. That tier 2 is what I describe as a quarterback that you win a Super Bowl because of, not one that you win a Super Bowl with. And, that's been something that I think has been missing in a lot of these big matchups. So that plus the defense, this team's right on the cusp of things, and they're going to have some good challenges ahead to potentially get into that top tier. But then we do have the top tier. I've got the Chiefs at number 3, just as we had them last week. Look, Marquez Valdes-Scantling catches the damn football, and we're sitting here saying, look how great that defense is. They had a great game plan against Hurts, and, you give Mahomes a chance late in the game, they're going to do it against anybody. But that is a part of the thing here for the Chiefs, right, is the wide receivers have now had these games where they're just really letting him down. But also, like, Travis Kelce fumbled inside the Eagles' 5-yard line. Like, they made some big mistakes in this game. I still think play for play, they were right there with the Philadelphia Eagles, who, surprise, we're going to rank number 1 this week. So I'm not worried about the Chiefs. They're still in a prime position to go get the 1 seed in the AFC. But obviously, it's frustrating that they've now had a few games now where they're just making too many mental mistakes that are too much to overcome. And fortunately for the Chiefs, they've earned the benefit of the doubt to say they can weed those things out and play smarter football here into the back quarter of the season. Then I got the Niners at 2. They roll the Bucks. Brock Purdy just continues to impress and play basically flawless football. I mean, outside of one minor overthrow late in this game, like, he literally was incredible. Continues to look more and more to me like Joe Burrow the more you watch him. I know that's a big statement, but just kind of the way he moves in the pocket and his moxie, he doesn't quite have the accuracy and arm talent that Joe Burrow does, but there's a lot of similarities there. And when you got these playmakers, you got Ayuk playing like a true number one, all these other guys, and then of course this defense. I mean, man, they're crazy. And then you got the Eagles doing what they're doing. They win a game where they didn't have their best day. You know, I think there's something to be said about the game plan the Chiefs had. I think if you blitz and get in these receivers' face, you can have some success against their offense. It's going to be something to keep an eye on. I've always felt like the blitz is probably the way you want to attack not just Jalen Hurts, but this offensive line. It's like kind of, you know, it's like when the Ravens went against the Lions. It's like the Ravens were like, well, we can't beat them with 4, but let's try to confuse them and outman this offensive line. Because the one thing you can't have is all these plays where Jalen Hurts is, you know, dropping back and having these 6-second pockets, right? So I am curious to see if that is a new way that defenses are going to really attack the Eagles, and how do the Eagles respond to that. But overall, I mean, this defense is sick. They got answers to everything, seemingly, offensively, other than maybe the blitz. But yeah, the Eagles definitely number one. I don't think you're going to get any argument there. So there are the Week 12 power rankings. We're going to have a condensed week here with the holidays. We're going to have the Fully Inflated Football podcast will be out this afternoon here on Tuesday, recapping all of the Week 11 games in depth. I also plan on getting an edge position tier maker video out to you guys at some point this week, along with my weekly NFL picks. So it's going to look a little bit different on the channel this week. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any of that good stuff. And thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below where you agree, where you disagree. And we'll see you soon. Peace out.